The next day, the media, they asked me, how are you going to deal with this the rest of your life? You lost this game for the team, and I go, wait a minute. You know, I didn't lose the game for the team, and we haven't even finished the series.
No matter how you look at it, there's always, I've looked at it a couple of times trying to figure out who would have beaten who to the bag. But seriously speaking, it was a 50-50 right there. You never really know. It would depends on how well he could have recovered from his lateral movement and stuff, because I was already full tilt.
Bill Buckner was a great hitter, but his tragic end began when one ground ball rolled through his legs. It happened in Game 6 of the 1986 World Series. Mookie Wilson hit a slow ground ball toward first base. The ball took a strange, late hop. It slipped under Buckner's glove. It rolled all the way through his legs. Ray Knight ran home from second base and scored the winning run. Boston lost the game, and one image would follow Buckner for the rest of his life. I am Mason, and this is Baseball Icons. Before that night, Buckner had already given fans 22 years of great baseball. He had more than 2,700 hits. He had won a batting title in 1980, but this one play would follow him forever, and it would follow him in a way that almost no other player's mistake in baseball history ever seemed to follow anyone else quite so closely. And as we look past that one painful play, use the hype feature and give this video some hype, so more fans can see the full story behind the moment. Buckner was already a proven hitter long before that error. He was tough. He played hurt more than almost anyone in baseball. That toughness made him great. It also kept him on the field long after his body was breaking down. His condition on that October night made the whole moment even harder to watch, because everyone close to the team already knew how much pain he was carrying. The punishment that followed him did not stop when the game ended. It followed him for years, into his home, and into his family's daily life. To understand why he was even standing on that base at all, we have to go back to where his story began, on a small street in California, in a home that had already lost so much. William Joseph Buckner was born on December 14, 1949. He grew up near Vallejo, California, in a small area called American Canyon. His childhood was normal for a while. Then his father, Leonard Dean Buckner, died in 1966. Bill was still a teenager when he lost his dad. His mother, Marie Catherine Buckner, was left to raise 4 children by herself. She worked for more than 20 years as a stenographer for the California Highway Patrol. It was a steady job, but raising 4 kids alone, without a husband, was hard on any parent. Marie wanted her sons to stay busy and out of trouble after such a painful loss. She signed them up for Little League. She even changed Bill's birth certificate so he could join the league a year earlier than he was supposed to. That single choice tells us something about young Bill Buckner. He was already so eager to compete that his mother bent the rules just to let him play sooner than other kids his age. From the very start, Buckner was intense about the game. His brother Bob remembered him as a kid who focused hard on baseball, more than most children ever did. He would tell his teammates what to do, even when nobody asked him. He volunteered for the tough outfield spots that other kids did not want to play. He was already trying to prove, even as a boy, that he could handle anything that was put in front of him. At Napa High School, that drive turned into real athletic talent. In 1967, playing under Coach Dale Fisher, he hit an incredible .667. In 1968, he hit .529. Those numbers are almost unheard of for a high school hitter. He was also a star on the football field. He earned All-State and All-America honors as a wide receiver. He still holds school records for single-season receiving yards, career receiving yards, and career receptions, decades after he graduated. Very few athletes at that age show the kind of two-sport dominance that Buckner showed in high school. Most young athletes are strong in one sport and simply solid in another. Buckner was a genuine standout in both baseball and football at the same time, which is part of why his decision about college and professional baseball carried so much weight for him and for his family. Coaches around the state took notice of what he was doing on both fields, and scouts began showing up to his games well before he had even finished high school. Buckner had planned to attend the University of Southern California. He had a scholarship offer to play both football and baseball there, which would have been a rare and impressive path. But in June of 1968, the Los Angeles Dodgers picked him in the second round of the Major League Draft. This put him in a genuinely hard spot. He valued education highly, and he had grown up loving the San Francisco Giants, the biggest rival of the Dodgers. He did not like the Dodgers at all as a kid. Still, after thinking it over, he decided to sign and become a professional baseball player instead of going to college. His rise through the minor leagues was fast, faster than most young players could ever hope for. talent alone rarely moves a player through an organization that quickly. It usually takes a combination of raw skill and an unwillingness to accept anything less than constant improvement. Buckner had both in large supply from the very beginning of his professional career. In 1968, playing for the Ogden team in the Pioneer League, he hit .344 with 4 home runs and 44 runs batted in over 64 games. His manager there was a young man named Tommy Lasorda, who would later become one of the most famous managers in baseball history. In 1969, Buckner kept improving, batting .307 at AA Albuquerque and .315 at AAA Spokane, moving quickly through 4 different minor league teams that year. He also added 10 stolen bases while playing in the Arizona Instructional League that same year, a small but telling sign of the speed he still had at that early point in his career. In 1970, playing a full season for Spokane, he hit .335 with 74 runs batted in over 111 games. That same year, Buckner suffered a severely fractured jaw on the field. Doctors had to wire it shut just to let it heal. Most players would have shut things down for the rest of the season after an injury like that. Buckner kept playing anyway. He finished the year with his jaw wired closed, unable to eat normal food, still taking the field every day he was able to. It was an early sign of something that would follow him his whole career. Bill Buckner did not know how to sit out and rest. He treated pain like something to push through and defeat, not something to respect and heal from. Look at the pattern building here, piece by piece, long before he ever wore a Red Sox uniform. A boy who was pushed into sports a year early by his own mother. A teenager who lost his father and threw himself into competition instead of slowing down to grieve. A young professional who played an entire season with his jaw wired shut rather than take time to heal. None of these choices were bad on their own. Each one by itself looked like determination and grit, the exact qualities that scouts and coaches love to see in a young player. But stacked together, year after year, they formed a habit that would eventually work against him. Buckner was building a career on the idea that pain was something to defeat, not something to listen to. That habit carried him quickly to the major leagues. With the Los Angeles Dodgers, Buckner showed off real speed and strong defensive skill. He won the starting job in right field in 1971. He played left field in the 1974 World Series. During that same 1974 season, he even climbed the outfield wall, trying to catch Hank Aaron's record-breaking 715th home run, a moment that showed just how far he was willing to push his body for the game. Those early years in Los Angeles were, in many ways, the healthiest and most complete version of Bill Buckner as an athlete. He could run, he could cover ground in the outfield, he could steal bases and turn singles into doubles. Teammates and coaches saw a young player with a rare combination of contact hitting and speed, the kind of player who looked like he could be a fixture in the major leagues for 2 decades without any serious physical concerns standing in his way. Then, on April 18, 1975, everything changed. Buckner was sliding into a base when his foot got caught underneath it. He badly injured his left ankle in that single moment. A careful player might have shut things down right there and given the injury time to heal properly. Buckner did not. He played through the remainder of that season in serious pain. In September, doctors operated to remove a damaged tendon. In October, they went back in again to remove bone chips that had broken loose inside the joint. He never got his old speed back after that. His ankle would never be fully sound again for the rest of his career. For every season that followed, Buckner had to soak his feet in ice for hours before each and every game just to be able to play. His movements grew stiffer with each passing year. His limp got noticeably worse whenever the weather turned cold. Eventually, his body could no longer handle the physical demands of playing in the outfield at all, and his career had to shift in a new direction. Think about that bargain for a moment, because it sits at the center of this whole story. Every time Buckner forced himself back onto the field on a damaged ankle, he added another year onto his career. But he also added more permanent damage to a body that was already breaking down underneath him. It was a trade that kept paying off for him in the short term, while quietly costing him more and more with every season that passed. This was not a single bad decision made in a single afternoon. It was a pattern repeated over and over, season after season, for more than 15 years. Doctors would operate. Buckner would recover just enough to play again. He would push through pain that would have ended most other careers. And each time, the short-term reward of staying on the field seemed worth the long-term cost. Nobody forced him to make that choice again and again. It came from somewhere inside him, the same competitive fire his brother remembered from their childhood, the same refusal to sit out that kept him playing with a wired-shut jaw back in 1970. That fire made him one of the toughest players of his generation. It also meant his body was quietly running out of road. one game at a time, long before anyone in Boston ever heard his name. Before the 1977 season, the Dodgers traded Buckner to the Chicago Cubs. His new team moved him to first base for good, hoping the lighter physical workload would help protect his damaged ankle. It did not fully work. He started that season on the disabled list. Then, on May 4, 1977, he hurt the same ankle again while running the bases during a game. Cubs manager Herman Franks later said publicly that Buckner played that entire season at no more than 50% physical health, a striking admission from a manager about one of his own everyday players. To simply keep functioning at the major league level, Buckner built an exhausting daily routine for himself. He rode a stationary bike for hours before games. He performed specific, targeted exercises just to keep his ankle usable for another 9 innings. Cubs trainer Tony Garofalo would wrap heavy athletic tape from his calf all the way down to his foot before every single game. In the offseason before 1978, Buckner even tried classical ballet conditioning exercises, hoping the balance training used by dancers would help protect his damaged joint. This was not vanity or a strange hobby. It was a player doing whatever it took just to stay on a baseball field that his own body could barely handle anymore. And somehow, even while his body was falling apart underneath him, his bat kept producing results that most healthy players could never match. On May 17, 1979, Buckner had one of the wildest games of his career. He got 4 hits that day, including a grand slam, and drove in 7 runs by himself. Chicago still lost that game by a score of 23-22, but Buckner's individual performance was remarkable given the circumstances. In 1980, he won the National League batting title with a .324 average. That same year, he went 114 plate appearances before striking out even a single time. For any hitter, that level of bat control and contact skill is extraordinary, and it cemented his reputation around the league. What made Buckner so valuable was simple to explain. He put the ball in play far more often than other hitters. He almost never struck out. Even with a body that could barely move side to side anymore, he stayed one of the most dependable hitters in all of baseball. Teams and fans respected that kind of toughness deeply, but that same respect also fed the exact pattern that was hurting him behind the scenes. Buckner's whole identity as a player was built on never stepping aside, no matter the cost. The same toughness that fans admired made it harder and harder for him to admit that his body finally had real limits. Coaches loved having a player like this in their lineup. Fans loved cheering for a player like this on tough nights. Nobody around him had a strong reason to slow him down, because he kept delivering results no matter how much pain he was hiding. That is often how this kind of pattern survives for so long in professional sports. As long as the numbers on the scoreboard stay good, almost nobody stops to ask what the player's body is quietly paying underneath the surface. The damage kept building quietly underneath the surface. Even as the hits kept coming, bone fragments kept forming near his damaged ankle. The joint kept swelling and aching with every game he played. Late in 1984, he needed yet another surgery, just to remove more of those loose bone fragments from the joint. His continued excellence at the plate had a strange way of hiding just how much trouble his body was actually in. By this point in his career, Buckner had already spent 9 full seasons playing on a damaged ankle, 9 seasons of ice before games, 9 seasons of tape wrapped tightly around his lower leg, 9 seasons of a body that kept breaking down in small ways while the batting average stayed strong enough that almost nobody outside the clubhouse fully understood how much pain was involved in every single game he played. In the middle of that same 1984 season, Buckner was traded to the Boston Red Sox. Boston was a demanding and difficult place to play professional baseball. The team had not won a championship in decades by that point. Fans and sports writers talked constantly about a so-called curse of the Bambino, and every single season that passed without a title made the pressure on the players grow even heavier. Boston was not just any team. Fans there had grown up hearing stories about championships that never came, year after year, decade after decade. Every new season carried the weight of every season before it that had ended in disappointment. A player joining that roster inherited all of that history the moment he put on the uniform, whether he wanted it or not. Buckner arrived in the middle of that pressure, on ankles that had already been through more than a decade of surgery and daily pain management, and he was expected to help carry a city's hopes on his shoulders. Even with his damaged legs, Buckner kept producing runs for Boston at a high level. He drove in 110 runs in 1985 and 102 runs in 1986. He wore custom high-top cleats that were built specifically for his aching ankles, becoming the first major league player known to wear that kind of shoe. His Achilles tendon caused him constant nagging pain. He had almost no ability to move side to side anymore on defense. But his bat was still clearly valuable, and that value gave the team a strong reason to keep running him out onto the field, even as his defense became a real and growing risk. To be fair to Buckner, he was not the one filling out the lineup card before each game. That decision belonged entirely to manager John McNamara. Still, the deeper pattern in Buckner's own life stayed the same as it always had. He wanted to be the tough veteran who never came out of a game, even as the most basic defensive movements were becoming harder and harder for his body to physically perform. That contradiction, built over so many years, was about to matter more than it ever had before in his entire career. Think about how long that contradiction had been building by October of 1986. 11 years had passed since the original ankle injury in 1975. 11 years of ice baths before games. 11 years of tape wrapped from calf to foot. 11 years of a limp that grew worse every time the weather turned cold. Buckner had managed to hide the worst of it behind good batting numbers for over a decade. But hiding a problem is not the same thing as solving it. The problem was still there, waiting for the one moment when it would matter more than any batting average ever could. It was October 25, 1986. Game 6 of the World Series. Boston was playing the New York Mets. It was the bottom of the 10th inning. Boston led 5-3. There were 2 outs and no runners on base. The Red Sox were one single strike away from winning the entire championship that the city had waited decades for. Buckner's body that night was in rough shape, even by his own standards. His ankles were in constant pain. His Achilles tendon ached with every single step he took. His side-to-side movement was extremely limited after so many years of damage. He wore his custom high-top cleats, heavily taped from his calf all the way down to his foot. Earlier in that very same 10th inning, a pitch had struck him hard in the hip, adding fresh pain to an already damaged body. Then everything fell apart, piece by piece, in a short stretch of a few minutes. Pitcher Calvin Schiraldi gave up a single to Gary Carter, then a single to Kevin Mitchell, then a single to Ray Knight. Suddenly, the Mets had cut Boston's lead down to just a single run. Manager John McNamara pulled Schiraldi out of the game and brought in Bob Stanley to face the batter, Mookie Wilson. During that long at-bat, Stanley threw a wild pitch. Catcher Rich Gedman could not block it in time. Kevin Mitchell scored all the way from third base on the play. The game was now tied. It is important to say this clearly and plainly. The game was already tied before Buckner ever touched the baseball. Then Mookie Wilson hit that slow ground ball toward first base. It took a strange, late hop, possibly off a small stone or an uneven patch of dirt. It rolled directly under Buckner's glove. It passed all the way through his legs. Ray Knight scored the winning run from second base. The Mets had won Game 6, and the picture of that moment would outlive almost everything else that happened that night. There were other failures that night, and they mattered just as much to the full story. Schiraldi gave up 3 straight hits with 2 outs, right when the team needed just one more out to win the whole series. Stanley threw the wild pitch that let the tying run score in the first place. Gedman could not block that same pitch behind the plate. Stanley was also slow getting over to cover first base on the final play of the inning. Manager John McNamara had a defensive replacement on his bench named Dave Stapleton, a player who had come in for Buckner late in games all throughout that postseason. This time, in the biggest moment of the year, McNamara left Buckner in the game. He later said he had wanted Buckner out on the field for the victory celebration he expected. Even Mookie Wilson's own speed was a factor in the play. Some who have studied the moment closely believe Wilson may have beaten the throw to first base anyway, even if Buckner had fielded the ball cleanly and made a good throw. None of that erases what actually happened, though. Buckner still did not stop the ground ball in front of him. That part is simply true, and this story will not pretend otherwise just to make him look better. Picture the moment again. Slowly this time, the ball leaves Wilson's bat and bounces twice on its way toward first base. It is not hit hard. On a normal night with a healthy first baseman, it is a routine play, the kind that happens dozens of times in any single season without anyone remembering it the next morning. Buckner bends at the knees. He reaches down with his glove. His ankles, worn down by 11 years of damage, do not give him the same quick, low reach that a younger and healthier player would have had. The ball skips past the leather. It rolls through the gap between his legs and out into short right field. In the time it takes to read this sentence, the whole shape of Bill Buckner's public life changed forever. There is a pattern in how the public tends to process painful losses, especially in sports. When a defeat is complicated, made up of many small mistakes by many different people, it is uncomfortable for fans to sit with. It does not offer a clean place to direct anger. A single, visible error, caught clearly on camera and replayed instantly, offers something much simpler. It offers one person, one moment, and one clear picture to point to. That simplicity is comforting in its own strange way, even though it is not fully fair to the person who becomes the target of it. It is easy to see why Buckner became the symbol of that entire loss. A chain of pitching mistakes and coaching decisions is complicated to picture. It takes many separate facts just to explain it clearly. A baseball rolling through a single player's legs is simple. It is one clear picture, and the human mind naturally holds on to simple pictures far more easily than complicated chains of events. All of the frustration built up from decades of Boston losing seemed to attach itself to that one image, and Buckner became the face of it for the rest of his life. After the game ended, reporters found Buckner sitting quietly at his locker. He told them he could not remember the last time he had missed a ball like that one in his whole career, but he knew he would remember this particular one for the rest of his life. He turned out to be exactly right about that, more than he could have ever known in that quiet, half-empty locker room. Highlight shows played the same few seconds of footage again and again, for years afterward. Every October, whenever Boston's season ended in disappointment, television broadcasts would cut back to the same clip. A whole generation of baseball fans who had never seen Buckner play a single healthy season of first base grew up knowing him only through those few seconds of footage. The other 21 years of his career slowly faded into the background of the story, even though they were the very thing that had made him a major league player worth watching in the first place. The story did not end that night, even though it often gets remembered that way. Boston still had Game 7 left to play. They actually led that game 3-0 early on, giving fans real hope for one more inning or two. But once again, the pitching staff could not hold on to the lead. Boston lost Game 7 by a final score of 8-5. The Mets won the World Series. So here is the honest truth about that whole collapse, laid out plainly. Buckner did not lose the championship by himself. The full record shows that clearly, once you look past the single image everyone remembers. The game was already tied before his error even happened. Boston had an entire extra game to win the series and simply could not do it. Several teammates and the manager himself made costly mistakes that night, both before Buckner's play and after it. It is possible to hold two true things at the same time, even when they seem to pull in different directions. It is true that Buckner was treated unfairly by a public that turned one play into the entire story of his career. It is also true that the play itself really happened, and that his own long-term choices about his body played some part in putting him in that position. Neither of those truths cancels the other one out. Both belong in any honest account of that night. But none of those other facts erase what Buckner actually did on that field. He did not field the ball when it came to him. His body had been failing him for years by that point, and everyone close to the team already knew it. His refusal to slow down across his entire career had helped put him in that exact spot, standing on damaged ankles in the single biggest moment of his professional life. His toughness was part of what made him a great player for 2 decades, but on that one night, it also became part of the tragedy that would define him. He does not deserve to carry all of the blame for what happened in that inning, but he also cannot be fully removed from it simply because other people around him failed first. What came after the game was harder on Buckner than the actual error itself. The media replayed the moment constantly, on television and in newspapers, for years afterward. Reporters asked him the same painful questions again and again, no matter how much time had passed. Fans treated the mistake as a personal insult against them, not as an ordinary part of a baseball game. During the 1987 season, he was booed and heckled every single time he stepped onto the field at Fenway Park. Boston eventually released him from the team. He began receiving death threats through the mail, along with cruel and abusive letters from strangers. Reporters and television camera crews staked out his home, watching his family from the street. His wife, Jody, and their 3 children lived under that same crushing pressure day after day. One afternoon, Buckner was playing catch in the yard with his youngest child. He missed a ball that his child threw back to him. His child said it was okay, because his dad had trouble with grounders. The child meant nothing cruel by that comment. It was completely innocent. But it showed, in a small and painful way, just how deeply that single moment had settled into their family, even inside the walls of their own home. Buckner's children were bullied at school because of what had happened to their father on national television. His son in particular faced repeated abuse from other kids. Buckner felt deep guilt and anger that he could not protect his own children from something that was entirely out of his control. It is worth pausing on that feeling for a moment. Buckner had spent his whole career pushing through pain that he could control, at least to some degree, through effort and willpower and grit. This pain was different. There was no ice bath for it. There was no tape or exercise routine that could protect his children from cruelty at school. For a man who had always found a way to fight through physical pain, this kind of helplessness was a completely new and much harder burden to carry. The family first tried to find some peace by moving to Iowa, choosing it partly because it felt far away and quiet compared to Boston. Later, they settled permanently in Idaho, near the city of Boise and the smaller town of Meridian. The slower, quieter pace of life in the Treasure Valley finally gave the family the space they had been searching for, far from the cameras and the reporters who had once camped outside their door. None of the anger directed at Buckner and his family was fair or justified in any way. Death threats and cruelty toward children are never acceptable, no matter what happened during a single baseball game. That part of the story is simply wrong, and it deserves to be named as wrong. The criticism of Buckner as a professional athlete and the choices he made on the field is one thing. The abuse aimed at his innocent family was something else entirely, and it crossed a line that never should have been crossed by anyone. A baseball game, no matter how important it feels in the moment, is not a fair reason to threaten a man's life or to torment his children at school. That distinction matters, and it stayed true no matter how painful the loss in Game 6 had been for the city of Boston. Buckner's path back to Boston did not wait until the team finally won a championship of its own. It actually started much earlier than most people remember today. After brief stops with the California Angels and the Kansas City Royals, Buckner returned to the Red Sox for one final short stretch in 1990. On April 9th of that year, he walked back onto the field at Fenway Park and received a long, warm standing ovation from the home crowd. On April 25, 1990, at 40 years old, Buckner hit an inside-the-park home run. He ran the bases on ankles that were badly calcified and worn down after years of damage. He crossed home plate standing up, without even needing to slide. It was the 174th and final home run of his career. It was an impressive athletic moment on its own, but it was also one more example of a man pushing a badly damaged body far past what most people would ever consider safe or reasonable. That 1990 season showed something important about how Buckner was already beginning to be seen differently by at least some fans in Boston, even before the team had won anything new. The standing ovation on opening day did not erase the years of booing that had come before it, but it showed that time, and a bit of distance from that October night, had already started to soften how at least some people in the stands felt about him. Full forgiveness from the wider public was still years away, but the seeds of it had already been planted, quietly, well before anyone in Boston had a new championship banner to hang. The bigger, more symbolic moment came later, on April 8, 2008. By then, Boston had already won championships in 2004 and 2007, finally ending the long drought on its own. Buckner was invited back for the team's home opener that season. He walked out onto the field from behind a brand new banner celebrating the team's recent championships. The crowd stood and cheered for him for a long time. Buckner cried in front of the entire stadium. He threw the ceremonial first pitch to his former teammate Dwight Evans. It was a clean strike right down the middle. It is worth being honest about the timing of this moment, because it matters to the full story. Boston's forgiveness came easily only after the team had already ended its own championship drought without any help from Buckner. For many long years before that, the famous mistake still defined how the public saw him, no matter what else he had accomplished across his long career. After his playing days ended, Buckner built an entirely new life for himself in Idaho. He became a successful real estate developer and investor in the years that followed. He even built a housing subdivision near Boise and gave it the name Fenway Park. He held a minority ownership stake in a car dealership in the small town of Emmett. He gave real time and effort to local charities in his new community, including the Boise Rescue Mission, the Women's and Children's Alliance, Dress for Success, and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. In Idaho, he was not primarily known as the man who made a famous mistake in a World Series game. He was a neighbor, a businessman, and a dedicated volunteer who consistently showed up for causes that mattered most to the people around him in his adopted home state. Friends in Boise later described him as someone who cared deeply about the community he had chosen for his family, far away from the noise and the cameras that had once followed him everywhere he went. Later in life, Buckner faced a new and very different kind of struggle. He was diagnosed with a disease called Lewy body dementia. It is a progressive brain disease that gets worse over time. It slowly damages a person's memory and clear thinking. It can cause a person's level of awareness to shift and change without any warning at all. It can bring on vivid, detailed visual hallucinations. It can badly disrupt normal sleep, it can cause stiff movements and a shuffling walk that grows worse over time. Buckner and his family kept much of this illness private, choosing not to share every painful detail with the public while he was still alive. There is a strange and painful irony in this final chapter of his life. For decades, Buckner had built his entire identity around fighting through physical pain with sheer willpower. Ice baths, tape, exercise, ballet conditioning, all of it was built on the idea that a strong enough will could outmuscle a damaged body. Lewy body dementia does not work that way. It cannot be taped up or iced down. It slowly changes the way the brain itself works, no matter how tough or determined the person carrying it might be. The same man who had once willed himself through a season with a wired-shut jaw now faced something that could not be willed away. Through all of it, Buckner leaned on an unexpected and meaningful friendship. Over the years, he and Mookie Wilson, the very man who had hit that famous ground ball back in 1986, had become close personal friends. They met often at autograph signing events around the country. They made a quiet agreement between themselves to look out for each other whenever reporters tried to ask unfair or exploitative questions about that one moment. They talked about their families. They talked about fishing trips they hoped to take together someday. When Buckner was finally diagnosed with his illness, he chose to tell Mookie Wilson himself, one of the very first people he called. Wilson later said that losing Buckner felt like losing a brother of his own. It is a genuinely striking detail when you really sit with it for a quiet moment. The two men most connected in the public imagination to that single ground ball, the fielder who missed it and the hitter who put it in play, ended up as two of the closest friends either of them had in their later years. Their bond grew out of a shared understanding that almost nobody else could offer them, an understanding of what it feels like to have one moment define an entire public identity, no matter how much other work and other years stand behind it. Bill Buckner died on May 27, 2019. He was 69 years old. His death came after a long and difficult battle with Lewy body dementia. Nothing in his life as an athlete ever caused that disease, and nothing about his long list of baseball injuries caused it either. It was simply a cruel and completely separate ending to a long, complicated, and ultimately remarkable life. The man who had once willed himself through a wired-shut jaw, a shattered ankle, and years of quiet pain, finally faced something that no amount of toughness could outlast. And he faced it with the same quiet steadiness that had carried him through every earlier hardship in his life. Bill Buckner could not erase the ball that passed through his legs. But in the end, one single mistake was never quite enough to fully explain the player, the pain, or the man he truly was.